I never do this. Call me crazy, but I'd never call a teenage babysitter for my kids. I don't trust them. But hey, it's not my story, so let me just tell it. This babysitter from Oregon was watching two kids, a 4-month-old baby boy and his 3-year-old sister, when she heard the kids' parents pull up in their truck outside the house. Okay, the babysitter's freaking out because she just got a text message saying that they're home early. And if you've ever had a babysitter before, you know the drill. You got to hide all the snacks you've been eating and try to clean up your mess before the parents get in the door. So the babysitter starts cleaning while the kids are still playing. She's carrying the baby around. Then, according to the babysitter, she must have blacked out, or maybe she was sleep deprived, because she woke up and suddenly she was standing at the top of the staircase with the baby in her arms, and she doesn't remember going up the stairs. Like what? How does that happen? Well, luckily she was okay, and the baby was okay, but she was freaked out. So she called 911 and told them that she needed help because she had just tried to feed the baby, and then she just woke up and she's standing here. The operator asks, "Are you sure you didn't go upstairs?" To which she replies, "I don't know. I think I did. I don't know what happened." So they dispatch a cop and an ambulance. They show up, check out the baby, make sure everything's fine, and ask the babysitter what happened. And the babysitter's like, "I don't know. I was downstairs and then I woke up here. I swear I was feeding him downstairs just a second ago." So the police take one look at the baby and realize that the baby was never in any danger. And honestly, it seems like the babysitter's just being super paranoid, right? Because babies fall asleep while being fed all the time. So the cops are chalking this up to a very tired babysitter who had a momentary lapse in attention, which happens to the best of us. No harm, no foul. They check everybody out, and they send the baby back down the stairs with his parents. And the mom and dad were probably thinking, what an eventful evening. Thanks, lady, right? But now hold on tight because this part gets crazier. While all this is going on, the babysitter's like, "No, I need medical attention. I need to go to the hospital." They're like, "Okay, we're leaving you here with the paramedics. Have a nice night." So the babysitter goes off in the ambulance with the paramedics, and she tells them that she needs help because she thinks that she might be going insane. And listen, I'm no psychologist, but if you were standing at the top of a flight of stairs with a baby and you do unremember doing it, it sounds to me like you're telling the truth, but I digress. So the paramedics take her to the hospital, and nobody knows what's going on. They run some tests, they check her out, they scan her brain, whatever. And they keep asking her, "Do you remember taking the baby upstairs?" And she's like, "No. I mean, I think I did, but I don't know. I don't remember." Now, it's important to note that the whole time she's insisting that she needs psychiatric help, not physical help. And the people at the hospital are like, no, you don't need psychiatric help. You're fine. You just need to take better care of yourself. You're exhausted. Take a nap. Have a good night. And she's like, "No, I'm telling you, I'm losing my mind." Finally, at about 4 a.m., she gets discharged and she goes back to the house where she's staying and she falls asleep on the couch. Then the next morning she wakes up and freaks out again because she thinks that she's gone. Nah, have another episode. So she calls her friend and she tells her friend that she thinks she's going crazy because she couldn't remember if she took the baby upstairs last night. Then finally, and this is the weirdest part, her friend tells her, "You didn't take the baby upstairs. You fell asleep on the couch last night. You never went upstairs." So the babysitter runs upstairs to check, and lo and behold, there's the baby in his little crib asleep. He was never missing. The babysitter never took him upstairs. I know, I told you this story was nuts, but the moral of the story is that you should always take care of yourself. You could be suffering from sleep deprivation and stress, and that's no way to live. Talk to your friends and family. Get the help you need because things could have ended very badly for the babysitter if she had actually hurt the baby. Welcome to my channel. This is the most haunted place in America. In 1883, a young man named William moved into an apartment in Chicago. The apartment was located on the top floor of a 4-story building at the corner of 22nd and Dearborn. The apartment had been the go-to spot for bachelors looking to move to the Windy City and make their dreams come true, since it was close to everything. Unfortunately, William wasn't exactly living the life of luxury. His apartment was located directly above a saloon, and sometimes the patrons would sneak up to his floor to relieve themselves of their drunken stupors. Then there was the time a woman jumped out of a window and landed on his balcony. And then there was the rat. It was a big rat. But nothing could have prepared William for what happened next. One day, while walking down the stairs to his basement, he noticed a storage room was in disarray. He asked his neighbor if she knew what was in there, but she didn't. William figured it was just some old junk and made a mental note to check it out later. A few weeks later, William was awoken in the middle of the night by what sounded like screams in the basement. Of course, he thought nothing of it and went back to sleep. The next morning, however, he decided to finally check out that storage room. As he made his way down the creaky stairs, he noticed a small padlock on the storage room door. He didn't remember seeing one before, so he asked the super about it. The super said that he didn't know anything about it and suggested William ask the woman upstairs. William thanked him and headed back up to his apartment to ponder the mystery of the locked room. He tried the doorknob to see if it was locked, but it was unlocked. He walked into the apartment and began searching for the owner of the room. He checked the closet and the pantry, but there was no sign of anyone living in the apartment. He checked under the bed and behind the curtains, but there was still no sign of anyone. He decided to search the rest of the apartment to see if there were any clues as to who might own the room. But everything looked normal. The furniture was neatly arranged, and there were no signs of struggle anywhere. He even checked the bathroom to see if someone had recently moved out and left in a hurry, but everything was as it should be. There was no one in the apartment, and there was no sign of forced entry. William went back downstairs to the storage room and tried the doorknob again. It was still unlocked. He opened the door slowly and stepped inside. There was nothing in the room except for a dark, dank smell and cobwebs. William turned on the light and saw something that made him run out of the room screaming. Someone had broken the lock, and the room was covered in blood. William ran to the nearest jail and told them that someone had broken into his apartment and attacked him. The police searched the apartment, but there was no sign of a struggle or a weapon. They found blood on the floor and walls, but it was old, and they assumed that William had been attacked sometime in the past. The rumors started immediately. People began talking about how the basement was haunted, and that William had been attacked by a ghost. Some people even claimed to hear the screams of a woman in the basement at night. No one could explain why the room was locked, who had broken the lock, or why the killer had covered the walls with blood. Today the building is still standing, but the apartment where William lived has long been abandoned. People still claim to hear the sound of screams coming from the basement at night. Some say that if you listen closely, you can still hear the blood dripping down the walls. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a scary one. It's about a phone on the wall. This comes from a Reddit user. I was doing a renovation on a house in Ohio, and we had a rotary phone in the wall that we found while doing a renovation. The phone was disconnected, but when my employee touched it, it rang. We were both scared out of our minds, because it was in the middle of nowhere. There was no power or phone lines hooked up to it either. We go to answer the phone, and a voice on the other end starts to say our names one by one, and then hangs up. I don't know if this is some sort of a prank, but it's freaky to say the least. If anyone knows anything about these type of things, please let me know. Yeah, if anyone watching knows anything about these type of things, please let me know in the comments, because that is insane. That is absolutely insane. I've never heard of such a thing happening, especially with the phone ringing and then knowing your name. I mean, what are the odds of that? Some people can just run with this story. Some people are going to be like, oh, it's fake. He made it up. This didn't actually happen. I'm calling BS, and I'm like, listen, you can call BS all you want. I'm not saying I believe it, but I'm saying you can't prove that it didn't happen. So at least leave that possibility open. Can't prove it didn't happen, so stop trying. And I love how he says, if anyone knows anything about these type of things, please let me know. Okay, well, yeah. Do you want to know what kind of things I'm talking about? Because there's a lot of stories on this channel about phones, rotary phones, old phones, landlines in general, especially rotary phones. People will find old rotary phones, old phones in general, and then the LL start ringing, and then the LL pick up, and the LL hear voices on the other end. Sometimes it's static. Sometimes it's just dead. Sometimes it's voices. Sometimes they try to get the person to say their name and they won't. Sometimes they'll say the person's name. And look, I understand that this might seem like a prank, but if you're the one getting the phone call, okay, you're the one answering the phone. No one else is on the line. There's no one else there. You pick up the phone, and they already know your name. That's kind of crazy. That's kind of crazy. How well? Yeah, how did they know our names? Okay, do you think it's a coincidence that they knew his employee's name and also the guy that was renovating the house? Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a coincidence. I think somebody played a trick on them, but who would do such a thing? Who would hide a phone in the wall and then wait for someone to touch it? And then have their friend or themselves on the other end say their names one by one? Who does that? That's crazy. That's crazy. Out! I don't know who does that, but somebody does that. It's crazy. And I don't know why they do it, but they do it often enough that we get multiple stories like this every single month. So somebody out there is playing a trick on people. I wish they'd stop, but they won't. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If you didn't, you can always hit the dislike button. Either way, let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you next time. This is the host, and this is an emergency broadcast. Do not go outside. They are here. Do not go outside. Repeat, do not go outside. They are here. This is not a drill. This is an emergency broadcast. If you're in the small town of Alton, Kansas, or anywhere in the general vicinity, do not go outside. They are here. If you hear this message, hide inside, lock your doors, and do not come out until further notice. If you live in the area and you don't have a radio, you need to get inside right now. You need to lock your doors. Do not come out. They are here. You repeat, they are here. The message was cut short by the radio station manager, who immediately went on the air to explain what had happened. He said that there had been a technical glitch and that there was no need for people to panic. However, the townspeople were already in a panic. Earlier that evening, many had witnessed something strange walking through the cornfields outside of town. Some described it as a man with glowing red eyes, while others said it looked more like a large dog. One witness even claimed that it had moved with unnatural speed, far faster than any human or animal should be able to move. It was almost as if it were floating above the ground, moving with an eerie silence that sent shivers down their spines. Many tried to dismiss these sightings as mere hallucinations brought on by the intense heat and humidity of the summer night. The temperature had climbed into the triple digits in Alton, and the relentless hum of insects added an eerie soundtrack to the oppressive heat. But as the night wore on, and the strange creature continued to appear in different parts of the town, the residents grew increasingly uneasy. Then came the emergency broadcast. Do not go outside. They are here. The message repeated over and over again, each repetition driving home the sense of impending doom that seemed to hang over the town. People huddled in their homes, listening to the radio, waiting for further instructions that never came. When the station manager finally broke the silence to say that there had been a technical glitch, the relief was palpable. But the question remained: what was out there in the darkness? Was it a man with glowing red eyes? Was it a hallucination brought on by the heat? Or was it something else entirely? The next morning, the sun rose to reveal a town in chaos. People emerged from their homes to find their cars and trucks with their tires slashed, their windows smashed. The creature from the night before had paid a visit while they were hiding in their homes. But as the dust settled and the townspeople began to assess the damage, they also began to piece together the truth. It turned out that the emergency broadcast had not been a technical glitch after all. Someone or something had hacked into the station's system and broadcast the message. But who would do such a thing and why? The police were called in, but they had no leads. The only evidence they had to go on were the terrified whispers of the townspeople and the extensive damage to their property. As the investigation continued, more bizarre incidents occurred, leading the residents of Alton, Kansas to believe that whatever was out there in the cornfields was not just a man with glowing red eyes or a figment of their feverish imaginations. It was something real, something sinister, and it was watching them. They never did figure out who had hacked the radio that night or what had caused the destruction in the town. But the mystery only added to the fear. After all, if something so terrifying could strike without warning, then they knew that they were never truly safe. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be quite an interesting one because this has left people wondering what the hell's going on with this guy and why would anyone do such a thing. The strange case of the man who scrubbed at a dark stain in his kitchen for weeks, only to find a mummified hand underneath the floorboards. This comes from a Reddit user. I had a house in New Jersey built in 1920. It was a beautiful old house with many rooms and an attic. It needed a lot of work, but that's why I got such a great deal on it. While doing a walkthrough, I noticed there was what looked like blood stains on some of the floorboards in the kitchen. I figured it was just a type of stain that wouldn't come up with regular cleaning, so I made a mental note to address it later. Fast forward a few months and I decided to rip up the offending boards and restain them. As I got the boards up, I could see it was a dark stain on the floorboards, almost black and not dirt or grime. It was solid. I thought maybe it was a small animal that had gotten under the house and decided to take its last breath on my floor. When I removed the last board, I saw a shape in the wood beneath. Excited to see what was going on, I grabbed a knife and started to pry. There was a loud pop as something inside shifted. Then I felt something hard and dense. I continued to dig and saw a fleshless hand with long, thick fingers. The rest of the arm was not there, only the hand and part of the forearm. It was mummified and wrapped around a piece of wire, almost like it had been put there deliberately. I took some pictures and called the police. They were very about it all. I should mention that this is in an older part of town, where there are lots of old houses and supposedly a lot of mob activity back in the day. After they dusted for prints and took the hand, they said it would be a week or more before I heard anything. They also suggested I get an attorney. That was weird. I asked if they knew who it might be, and they said they'd let me know if they found out. A week later, I got a call from the police. They said they couldn't get any prints off the hand because it was so dry. Also, no one had reported a missing person with those specific stats. They also didn't find any DNA. I eventually got the floor fixed and stained, but now I can't help but wonder what happened to that hand. Was it from someone who went missing? And if so, what happened to the rest of him? Why was the hand put in the floor? If it was done on purpose, why not just leave it in one piece? So many questions and no answers. Yeah, I don't think this guy got the answers he was hoping for, but I think we'd all like to know what happened here. And I agree, it is kind of strange that they didn't find any DNA, which usually can be found even if it's been a while since it was there. But it being a mob hit kind of makes sense, since they probably did that on purpose. But the fact that they didn't find the rest of the body makes me think this may have just been some random guy who had a really bad accident, and then his family tried to cover it up. But again, that's just me speculating. What do you guys think happened here? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. But anyways, that's all for this video, and I'll see you next time. Hello, friends. Man returned a book to the Boston Public Library that was 42 days overdue. He walked up to the front desk where an elderly black woman was sitting. She looked at him and then slowly leaned forward and said in a low voice, "Don't let it touch you at night." As he turned back, he saw that no one was behind the counter. Startled, he took a step back. Was the old woman a ghost? He told the library director about the incident. The director listened patiently, and when he finished, said calmly, "Madam, are you sure you were in the right place at the right time?" "Of course I'm sure," the man insisted. "I distinctly heard her say not to let the book touch me at night. What did she mean?" The director sighed, put his hand on the man's shoulder and said apologetically, "You see, our library has an unwritten rule. If a book is returned more than 3 weeks late, in this case, the book was 42 days late. So according to our rules, we have to charge you a $1,000 fee." The man looked at the book in his hand, then at the director and said, "But why would returning a book make me pay so much money? Why not just charge me a late fee?" The director replied, "Because, madam, if you don't pay the $1,000, she will come out from behind the counter every night and haunt you." Overdue books are a big problem for libraries. People who borrow books and don't return them on time deprive other library users of the opportunity to borrow them. Libraries try everything they can to get people to return their books on time, such as sending reminder emails or text messages, calling borrowers, and even hiring a collection agency to collect overdue items. But there are also stories about mysterious fines for overdue books. For example, in 2013, a woman returned a book to her local library in England that was 64 years overdue. That's a long time ago. World War II was still going on when she borrowed the book, but she only had to pay a fine of $937. How could this be? It turns out that the library was having a little fun with its customers. The library staff knew perfectly well that the woman hadn't stolen the book on purpose, nor did they intend to ask her to pay such a high fine. In fact, the staff had long forgiven her overdue fee. They just wanted to make her laugh. The woman was very happy because she didn't have to pay a fine and got to tell a funny story about herself. So next time you go to the library, be careful. Who knows what kind of tricks the librarians are playing? Maybe they'll say something like, don't let it touch you at night. That's all for today. See you next time. Welcome back, everybody, to my channel. In our lead story today, we're going to look at a very mysterious case that happened in 2018. In 2018, 3 hunters were hunting in the woods near Valentine, Nebraska, just north of the South Dakota border. As they drove their truck through the small town, they decided to take a detour into the forest to see if they could find a good spot to hunt deer. After driving a little ways down the dirt road, the men came across a small clearing and decided to park their truck there. They got out and started walking into the trees, looking for a place to set up their deer stands. After walking a short distance, one of the men noticed something peculiar in the trees. It appeared to be a set of tire tracks. But what was strange about these tracks is that they went straight up a hill. As the hunter got closer, he noticed that the tracks led to a pickup truck that was parked at the top of the hill. This was strange in itself. But what was even stranger was that the engine of the truck was still running and the headlights were turned on. As the hunter approached the truck cautiously, he looked through the open window on the passenger side and saw something that made him run back to his friends. He told his companions to come quickly and see something that they would never forget. When they arrived, he pointed into the truck and told them to look inside. What they saw was a sight that has been known to terrify many people throughout history: a child in the passenger seat. But when they got closer, they realized that the child was not actually in the truck. It was a doll. But this was only the beginning of the mystery. As the hunters walked around the truck, they noticed something else strange. All around the truck, on the ground, were handprints that appeared to be children's handprints. And yet there were no children anywhere. The hunters searched all around the truck, but they didn't find any kids hiding nearby. And that's when one of the men got scared enough to call the police. When the sheriff's department arrived on the scene, they also couldn't find any children. The hunters showed them where they had seen the handprints, and the officers took a closer look. They then used a special chemical to identify some of the prints as being made by a barefoot child. But what was really strange was that the chemical did not react to some of the other prints. The officers could understand how a chemical meant to identify footprints would fail to react to certain parts of the handprints. This part of the story will likely make many people think of the classic horror movie The Silence of the Lambs. In that movie, young FBI trainee is sent to interview a brilliant but manipulative cannibalistic killer named Hannibal Lecter. Lecter helps the young agent track down another killer who skins his victims. At one point, Hannibal Lecter explains to the young agent why he believes Buffalo Bill, the serial killer, is no match for the FBI, he says. The woods are patient. The woods are very patient. But they are not kind to children who wander in and get lost. But that brings us back to the Nebraska case. The sheriff's officers spent a lot of time searching the area for any sign of a kidnapped child or any other evidence, but they came up empty-handed. They interviewed people who lived nearby, but no one had seen anything suspicious. To this day, the case remains unsolved. Some believe that it was the work of a deranged individual who lured children into the woods and then disposed of their bodies. Others believe that it may have been the work of something more sinister. Some even believe that it may have been the work of Bigfoot. Though Bigfoot has never been proven to exist, there have been many sightings over the years. Some believe that Bigfoot may be responsible for the disappearance of many children over the years. What do you think happened in this case? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching. This is the last voicemail. Hi, Mom. It's me. I'm at the library on campus. I just wanted to let you know that I might be staying up here tonight. There's a bunch of us that are going to be studying for finals, so I probably won't be coming home tonight. I'll call you when I get back. I love you. Bye. For 22-year-old Kristen Smart, that final phone call to her mother was more than just a quick hello. It was a desperate attempt to explain what had happened to her. Because what Kristen didn't tell her mom over the phone was that she was in grave danger and she needed help fast. But before we continue, please take a second to like and subscribe. It really helps our channel. Thanks. On May 1st, 2001, Kristen packed up her car and headed to Cal Poly University in San Luis Obispo, California, to start her sophomore year. She was excited to start the year and see her friends, and besides, she hadn't seen her mom, Sherry, in months. So when she got the chance, she called her mom to say hi. Little did they both know it would be the last time they'd ever speak to each other. After hanging up with her mom, Kristen drove to her sorority house. She quickly unpacked and then headed out again, this time to meet up with some friends. The friends she was going to meet, however, were not her close-knit group of sorority sisters. Rather, some guys from the school's rugby team. The main guy on everyone's mind was Paul Flores. He played center on the team and was considered by many to be the best player in school. And even though Kristen was almost exclusively seen with Paul after that day forward, he wasn't her boyfriend. That title belonged to a guy named Grant, who was also on the rugby team. In fact, Kristen was so enamored with Grant that just 2 weeks before she disappeared, she told one of her friends that if Grant ever broke up with her, she'd immediately dump the next guy she started talking to. But maybe she knew that was inevitable, because she also told that same friend that she felt like Grant was going to break up with her soon. Maybe that's why she was spending so much time with Paul, just a shoulder to cry on. But by all accounts, the two of them were just friends. And there was no indication that anything was going on between them romantically, or so everyone thought. You see, in addition to being friends with Grant and Paul, Kristen was also good friends with another woman named Ashley. And Ashley was convinced that Kristen and Paul were secretly an item. After all, they were always together. And she never saw Kristen getting cozy with anyone else. Plus, she said, everyone on campus knew that Paul was a player. So why would Kristen want to be seen with him so often? She was hoping that one day he'd break up with whoever he was dating and finally ask Kristen out. But that day would never come, because on May 1st, just one day after she called her mom, Kristen was reported missing. Her car was found on campus, but there was no sign of her anywhere. The police searched everywhere, even going as far as to bring in cadaver dogs. But after an entire week, they had nothing. No body, no leads, nothing. Then on May 11th, almost 2 weeks after Kristen went missing, something turned up. It was a single voicemail left on her cell phone. And when her mom, Sherry, listened to the message, she heard something that made her blood run cold. The message was only 16 seconds long, and it started off innocently enough. Hi, Mom. It's me. I'm at the, library on campus. I just wanted to let you know that I might be staying up here tonight. There's a bunch of us that are going to be, studying for finals, so I probably won't be coming home tonight. I'll call you when I get back. Love you. Bye. But then the line went dead, and when Sherry listened to the background noise, she could hear voices. They were whispering, and she couldn't make out what they were saying. But the most disturbing part came right after that. When she listened to the playback, the voices seemed normal. But when she listened to it on speakerphone, they sounded different. They sounded distorted, like they were coming from another room. And when she listened closely, she thought she could hear one of them say, "It's not him. It's not him. It's wearing his face." What was she talking about? Who was this mystery man? And was he the reason why her daughter went missing? This is a real unsolved mystery? And if you have any information about the case, please contact the authorities. Also, please remember to like and subscribe. It really helps us out. And as always, thanks for watching. This terrifying dashcam footage was recorded by a truck driver in Arizona. He and his friend were driving through the state when they spotted a woman in white walking along the side of the road. She'd been walking for quite some time, but the truck driver slowed down to see if she needed any help. That's when she turned her head and revealed her horrifying face. But what is it? The two truck drivers are part of a group called Highway Watcher Truckers. They travel the country, making videos about everything they see while driving. Like this huge pile of trash in New Mexico or this abandoned car in Texas. It's unclear exactly where in Arizona this footage was shot, but the group has a large following with over 128,000 subscribers. On an ordinary day, these two truck drivers were cruising down the highway when they saw something strange on the side of the road. A woman was walking in the hot sun, seemingly for miles. The driver who was recording the video said, "There's a lady in white walking on the side of the road." "Yeah, there's no shoulder, there's no sidewalk, there's nothing there. And she's been walking for a long time," the other person in the truck added. "She's been walking since before we got here. I've been watching her. I don't know why she's walking on the side of the road." The driver continued recording as they slowly approached the woman. In the distance, she looked like any normal person. But as they got closer, things started to look a little strange. As the truck gets within 30 feet of the woman, the driver yells, "Whoa, dude," because she's not reacting to them at all. She hasn't moved. In fact, she didn't even seem to acknowledge their presence. This is when the driver decides to slow down and try to talk to her. When he does, she finally turns her head, revealing that her entire face was missing. The driver immediately slammed on the brakes and turned the wheel to avoid hitting her. But how could someone walk down a highway with no face? What did it mean that she didn't react to the truck? Was she even human? Fortunately, these questions will likely never be answered. In a later video, one of the truckers explained what happened after they encountered the faceless woman. Said, "I wanted to go back, but my buddy was like, 'Dude, let's get out of here.' So we got out of there. Wish I would have went back, though, to see if it was a mannequin or what the heck it was." After sharing the video online, many people had their own theories about what was going on. Some thought it might be a crazed fan of the group, while others thought it was a homeless person who had lost their nose and mouth due to drug abuse. But there's another, more sinister explanation. According to a Reddit user, Highway Watcher is a popular channel in the trucking community. And there have been many instances where truckers have seen strange things on the side of the road, things that they should not have been able to see. The Redditor explained that sometimes when truckers drive, they enter a different dimension. While driving through the Bermuda Triangle of trucking, truckers can see demons, monsters, ghosts, and other supernatural things. This may explain why the woman didn't seem to react to the approaching truck. Might not have been human in the first place. Fortunately, the Highway Watcher guys never went back to check on the woman. If they had, maybe they would have found a crazed fan or a homeless person. Or maybe they would have found something even more terrifying, something from another dimension that doesn't want to be seen. But now it's time to hear from you. What do you think this woman's face was missing? Do you believe in the Bermuda Triangle of trucking? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to stay tuned for more. Well, if you've ever had an Uber or a Lyft, this story is for you. It's about a Florida woman who got into what she thought was her Uber, but it wasn't. And then she realized why. Let me tell you. It was 2019. A woman named Bridget Cooper was going home from a night out with friends in Miami. Around 2 a.m., she called an Uber. She stepped out of the club, got into the car, and told the driver the address. But within seconds, she realized something was wrong. The locks weren't working. She tried to lock the front door, but it wouldn't lock. So she unlocked it and tried again, but it just kept beeping. She could hear the driver laughing, turned around and said, "You're the third one this week." Before Bridget could even ask him what he meant, he sped up and made a turn onto a dark and unfamiliar street. Now, Bridget was scared, confused, and a little tipsy. She thought about jumping out of the car, but traffic was heavy, so she waited. Finally, at a red light, she opened the door and jumped out. The driver yelled at her to get back in, but she ignored him. When the light turned green, he drove off. Bridget posted about her experience on Facebook. She said, "I got into a car thinking it was my Uber, but turns out it was not. I don't even want to think about what could have happened. If I had gotten into that car, I would have been kidnapped, and no one would have known where I was at." Her post went viral. More than 300,000 people shared it. Then 2 women came forward with similar stories. One of them said she had a similar experience with the same driver. She also said the locks on the car doors did not work. The other woman said she took the same driver home from a nightclub. She, too, noticed that the locks didn't seem to be working. And she also said that he took her on a very long route. So the police finally caught up with the driver. His name is Uber Lucky Pierre. He was charged with 16 counts of theft, 15 counts of fraud, and 1 count of possession of a controlled substance. Investigators said that Pierre had been using a fake Uber account to trick passengers like Bridget. He was driving a 4-door sedan instead of an SUV like the one that Bridget had requested. But here's the thing. The police believe there are more victims. They say Pierre may have used this fake Uber account to lure in unsuspecting passengers between May and June 2019. Now, Pierre's defense is that all the women got into his car willingly. His lawyer said, "It's just a bunch of nonsense. Everybody got in his car willingly, and nobody complained until after they got dropped off. But here's the thing. If you call an Uber or a Lyft, you expect a certain car to pick you up, a specific make and model. But when Pierre accepted these ride requests, he was driving a different car every time. Sometimes it was a 4-door sedan, sometimes it was a pickup truck. But the app showed that a different vehicle was on its way. It's not the first time something like this has happened. In 2017, a woman in New York called an Uber, got into a car, then realized that it was a fake. The driver was not the one she had requested. It was a different person altogether. These kinds of incidents are rare, but they do happen. So how can you protect yourself? Well, here are a few things that you can do. First, always check the make and model of the car. If it doesn't match, don't get in. Also, take a moment to look at the driver's photo. Does he or she match the one on the app?
Oh,
If not, don't get in. You can also share your location with a friend, so someone is tracking where you are and where you were going. And if you feel uncomfortable, just cancel the ride and call another one. Now, a lot of us use ride-sharing apps. They're convenient, but we need to be careful. We need to be aware of our surroundings. Don't get into a car if you feel something isn't right, even if the driver is waiting and the app is showing a green check mark. As for Bridget, she got quite a bit of attention after her story went viral. She appeared on several TV shows. She even got a free vacation in the Bahamas. This is the host. This is your story. We'll see you next time. This terrifying camping discovery was made by a worker at a Louisiana cemetery. It's one of the most haunted places in the country. In 2017, 3 teenagers decided they wanted to spend the night in this cemetery. They were dared by their friends to stay in the graveyard from dusk till dawn. But when sunrise came around, only 2 of the 3 teenagers were found. One was missing. They searched everywhere for him, but he had vanished without a trace. Days later, they were still looking for him, even went to the local authorities, but the police didn't take them seriously. They said it was just a childish dare gone wrong. So the search was called off, but what they didn't know was that the boy who went missing had been discovered already. He was found in an old abandoned coffin that hadn't been opened in over 50 years. But how did he get there? Why didn't he come out when his friends called his name? In this video, we're going to tell you everything we know about this scary story. But before we get into it, be sure to hit that like button for more videos. Also, stick around until the end to hear about a special offer just for you. Let's start at the beginning. 3 teenagers decided to spend the night in a cemetery. They probably thought it would be a fun adventure, a horror movie dare, or something to do with their friends. But what they didn't realize was that this particular cemetery is one of the most haunted places in the United States. It's located in the town of St. James, Louisiana, just outside of New Orleans. This town is known for voodoo and dark magic. Many believe that the cemetery is cursed. Every year, paranormal investigators try to uncover the secrets of this cemetery, but so far nothing has been proven. In 2017, 3 friends decided to spend the night in the cemetery. They parked their car nearby and walked into the cemetery. They probably thought that spending the night in a haunted cemetery would be a great story to tell their friends. They could brag about how brave they were. But soon, they started to regret their decision. They were walking through the cemetery when they heard chains dragging metal moans. Some of the headstones were toppled over and others had been spray-painted with demonic symbols. But the scariest part was that they weren't alone. As they continued to walk through the cemetery, they saw a figure standing over a freshly dug grave. It was tall and thin with long, sharp claws. The teenagers screamed and ran as fast as they could, didn't stop running until they reached their car. When they got in the car, they locked the doors and rolled up the windows. They were safe inside the car, but now they were too scared to leave. They sat in the car for hours listening to the chains dragging and the moans getting closer.
Art.
Then they started to hear knocking on the car. It was a rhythmic knock, 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 knock. The teenagers were too scared to look outside. They just kept on knocking. Finally, the knocking stopped, and the teenagers breathed a sigh of relief. But then they started to hear voices, or whispering voices that seemed to come from all around them. The voices were getting louder and angrier. Then suddenly the car started to shake violently. The teenagers screamed as the car was thrown around like a toy. Then everything went silent. The car stopped shaking, and the voices faded away. The teenagers stayed in the car until sunrise, too scared to get out. When the sun finally rose, they got out of the car and started to walk through the cemetery. That's when they made the horrifying discovery. One of their friends was missing. They searched everywhere for him, but he was nowhere to be found. They called his name, but there was no answer. They eventually gave up and went home. But what they didn't know was that he had been discovered already. A worker at the cemetery had found him in an old abandoned coffin. The coffin was made of wood and had been buried underground for over 50 years, but somehow the boy had gotten inside. The worker tried to open the coffin, but it was stuck. He had to use a crowbar to pry it open. When he finally opened the coffin, he saw a skeleton wearing clothes similar to those worn by the boy who went missing. The worker was shocked and scared. He quickly closed the coffin and called the police. When the police arrived, they were skeptical. They didn't believe that a boy could have been missing for weeks and just showed up in a coffin. But when they opened the coffin, they were shocked. The skeleton was wearing a shirt with the name Brand. They knew the boy who went missing had been wearing that same shirt. To this day, no one knows how the boy got into the coffin. Some believe that he was kidnapped and the killer buried him alive. Others believe that he stumbled into the cemetery and fell into the open grave. Maybe he climbed into the coffin to get away from whatever was in the cemetery. It's possible that the kidnapper buried him there after seeing that he got away. We may never know what happened to him. But one thing is for sure. If you ever visit the cemetery, don't go alone. Thanks for watching. What do you think happened to the boy? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see more videos like this, be sure to hit that like button. Welcome back to my channel. Today's story will make you question everything. This comes from a Reddit user. It was about 2 a.m., and I was awoken in my home in a small town in Texas to what sounded like a baby crying in the woods behind our home. My husband and I live out in the country. We have 3 acres, and there are several wooded areas surrounding our property. When we moved in 2 years prior, we had a home inspection and an exterminator come out, and they both assured us that there were no signs of any previous inhabitants, squatters or otherwise. And the house had been empty for at least a year before we purchased it. As the weeks went by, the crying continued, and it seemed to be coming from just outside our bedroom window. It sounded like a baby being swung around and then slapped or hit. The noise would go on for hours and then stop as quickly as it started. We reported it to the police, but they couldn't do anything without more information. They suggested we get a camera to catch whatever was out there. But at that point, my husband and I were too scared to even go near the window. The cops also told us not to follow the sound because it could be a trap. But we were desperate to find the source and put an end to it. So one night, while the baby crying was going on, my husband and I grabbed a baseball bat and a flashlight and followed the sound. The trees in our yard are very close together, and there is a small creek that runs through it. The crying was coming from somewhere in the middle of the wooded area on the other side of the creek. As we got closer, we saw a clearing. In the middle of the clearing was a little girl's pink backpack. It was sitting on a log and it looked brand new. Husband and I noped out of there and called the police again. When they arrived, they searched the area with a canine but didn't find anything. They checked our security cameras and the footage showed nothing unusual. To this day, we don't know what was in that backpack. The police told us to keep the windows locked and not to follow the sound if it happens again, which it never did. I read online that people sometimes use dolls that make realistic crying sounds to lure potential targets. The police never caught whoever was doing this, and I honestly can't blame them. How are you supposed to catch something that you can't see, and that only happens at night? I asked the police if it might be a coyote or some other animal making the noise. They said that as unlikely since the sound is very human-like, and they've ever heard of an animal using a lure to hunt. I guess it could be some sort of sick joke that whoever did this thought was funny. But that doesn't explain why the police never caught them. Maybe it's best that way. Who knows? Brick, this is genuinely creepy. Okay, so first off, I'm glad you got out of there, okay? And I am glad that you listened to the police. When they told you not to follow the sound, because you could have stumbled upon something really dangerous, also I feel like this is something that would happen in a horror movie, right? Like this is definitely something that would happen in a horror movie. But I'm glad that you weren't in a horror movie, and instead, it's just a normal movie where you lived happily ever after and never heard the baby crying again. But I'm also glad that you posted this on Reddit so that we could hear about it. Thank you for your service. Our next story is from another Reddit user. I was working as a nanny in Connecticut, and my employer had just come back from vacation in Mexico. She wanted me to take care of her 2 kids, ages 4 and 6, while she took a nap. Everything was fine until about 11:30 a.m. when I heard loud banging in the master bedroom. It sounded like someone throwing a tantrum. I went to check in on the kids, and they were watching cartoons and eating cereal. I asked them if they heard the noise, and they said no, probably just mommy. Went back into the living room, and the noise started again. I went back to the kids, and they were still eating and watching TV. I asked again if they were sure they were okay, and they said yes. So I went back into the living room. At this point, the noise stopped, and I heard my employer call out for me from the bedroom. She asked me to come in, and she looked pale as a ghost. She told me that someone had broken in during the night and stolen a lot of jewelry from her jewelry box. She was shaken up and tearful. She called the police while I watched the kids. The police came and took a report, but they didn't seem optimistic about finding the person or recovering the jewelry. They said it was most likely a random break-in, and they had no leads. My employer was adamant that the kids should not have seen or heard anything, so I left it alone. The next day, I was getting the kids ready for school, and my employer was getting ready for work. She asked me to make sure the kids brushed their teeth and didn't watch TV all morning. Then she left for work. About 10 minutes after she left, I heard heavy footsteps and blood-curdling screams from the master bedroom. I went to investigate and found one of the kids standing in the doorway crying. He told me that his sister had fallen in the bathroom and hurt herself badly. I ran to help and found his sister lying in a pool of blood with a shard of glass sticking out of her leg. Blood was everywhere and she was in shock. I immediately called 911 and stayed on the phone with the operator until the paramedics arrived. I helped the little girl onto the couch and cradled her as she lost consciousness. The ride to the hospital was the longest 15 minutes of my life. I never imagined that I would have to perform first aid on a child. I was so scared that I was going to do something wrong and make things worse. Luckily, she made a full recovery. When my employer arrived at the hospital, she was hysterical. She kept asking me how this could have happened. She said she had no idea that the glass was in the bathroom. I told her that I wasn't allowed to look in the bathroom. She said that she had told me to, but I said I'm almost positive that she hadn't. Anyway, the police ended up finding a suspect in the attempted murder. It was the father. The father had cut the little girl's leg open with a shard of glass and tried to stage it as an accident. I hope he rots in hell. That is awful. Oh my gosh, that is so sad. Thank you for sharing this. Hopefully these stories gave you nightmares like they gave me nightmares. If you liked this content, check out my podcast where I publish the same episodes. Thanks for watching. Nevada is one of the most unique road tripping states. You can find everything from ghost towns to quirky small towns to huge cities. This can make planning a road trip challenging because there's just so much to see. While driving through Nevada, one couple stumbled upon an eerie town that made their hair stand on end. The two had been driving around for hours and needed gas. They pulled into a truck stop where they saw several cars, some trucks, and even RVs parked outside. As they approached the entrance, they noticed it was unlocked and the door was open. So they walked inside to see if anyone was there. But much to their surprise, they were the only ones there. All of the pumps were working, and there was even a worker's uniform behind the counter, but nobody was there. They decided to walk around and see if they could find anyone. And as they looked around the corner of the building, they spotted this sign. It read, "Back in 15 minutes." So they waited. After about 15 minutes, a car drove by, but the couple quickly hid because they didn't want to scare the driver. However, when the car passed by, they noticed something strange. The car didn't slow down. The driver didn't seem to notice them at all. It almost looked like the driver was going straight through the building. Just then another car drove up and parked at the gas pump. The couple decided to follow them and see what would happen. They watched as the people got out of the car and went inside the store. They waited and waited, but the people never came back out. They tried to get the worker's attention by knocking on the window, but he didn't respond. They started to freak out a little, so they jumped back in their car and drove away. When they stopped at the next gas station, they decided to use their GPS to find out where the mysterious town was. The GPS said that they were on the right track, but the town wasn't on any of their maps. They later found out that the town didn't exist. There was never a town there to begin with. So why did they see houses and cars and even lights on? Well, according to Atlas Obscura, there are a few small communities in the middle of the Nevada desert that have electricity, but no road access. That means the only way to get there is by plane or by walking. The government doesn't really consider these towns to be abandoned, since there are still people living there. But most of the residents are elderly and don't drive. So the cars, trucks, and even RVs you see belong to the few younger residents. They park them outside their homes and hook up to the electricity to watch TV and sometimes even air condition their homes. As for the gas station, it is likely that the workers there don't drive either. Probably have to hitch a ride with someone or walk to get to work. That's why you saw the sign saying they'd be back in 15 minutes. Most likely they sent someone to the nearest town to get more supplies. We think this is just a small part of the mystery. What do you think happened to the people in this town? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you can join us for more scary road trip stories. This couple found a creepy abandoned house in the woods while hiking, or watch this video instead.